Over time, we have developed tools to help us better understand the Earth. For thousands of years, people looked at the world and tried to record what they saw. Motivated by the desire to find shorter trade routes, as much as by the desire for knowledge, early explorers traveled the world and drew maps of the places they had been. The maps they drew ranged from early whimsical attempts to later ones that were surprisingly accurate. The exploration of our world continues to this day, but explorers have the advantage of being able to study the Earth from space. Photographs taken from orbiting satellites have given us a more exact picture and a better understanding of the Earth. The primary tools that geographers and explorers have developed to study the Earth are maps and globes. A globe is a model or small copy of the Earth. Looking at a globe is like looking at the satellite pictures taken from space. Because a globe is round like the Earth, relative shapes, sizes, and distances are shown quite accurately. Globes, however, have their disadvantages. They're hard to carry around, and they can only show you one side of the Earth at a time. Maps are flat drawings of the Earth. Unlike globes, they can let you see the whole Earth at once. Or they can show you just a small part of the Earth, such as your town, in great detail. However, because the Earth is round and maps are flat, they do not show relative shapes, sizes, and distances as accurately as globes do. Geographers have found ways to solve the problem of drawing a round world on flat paper. They call these drawings projection maps. There are a number of different types of projection maps, and each has its particular advantages and uses. The Mercator projection provides an accurate picture of shape and direction and is often used for ship navigation. The Robinson projection shows relative sizes more accurately, so is useful when making comparisons between places on the Earth. When discussing the Earth, geographers often divide it into two hemispheres. The word hemisphere means half a sphere, or half of the Earth. One division is made along an imaginary line halfway between the North and South poles. This line is called the equator. The equator divides the Earth into the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. Another imaginary line divides the Earth into the Eastern and Western Hemispheres. This line is called the prime meridian. In order to identify locations on a map or globe, geographers have created a system of imaginary lines called lines of latitude and lines of longitude. Latitude lines run east and west, longitude lines run north and south. These lines are measured in degrees. Degrees are further broken down into minutes and seconds. The equator is the starting point for measuring lines of latitude. The equator is 0 degrees latitude. Latitude lines are measured by the number of degrees they lie north or south of the equator. The prime meridian is 0 degrees longitude. Lines of longitude, then, are measured in the number of degrees they are east or west of the prime meridian. Together, these lines create a grid, or series of crisscrossed lines, to help you locate a point on a map or globe. When describing a location, we often speak of it in terms of direction. You already know north, south, east, and west. These 4 directions are called the cardinal directions. In between, there are 4 intermediate directions. Northwest, one intermediate direction, is halfway between north and west. The other 3 intermediate directions are northeast, southeast, and southwest. When using maps and globes, it helps to know what their scale is. The scale tells you their size in relation to the Earth. For instance, if the scale of a globe is 1 to 42 million, it means the Earth is 42 million times larger than the globe. You may often need to use a scale on a map in order to determine distances. A map scale may tell you, for example, that 1 inch on the map is equal to 100 miles on the Earth. The map scale is usually found in the map legend or map key. The map key contains other important information such as symbols. The map key tells you what different symbols represent, such as that a star is the symbol for a country's capital city. People use maps for many purposes, so there are many kinds of maps containing various information. One familiar map is a political map. It shows countries and cities. Another type of map is a physical relief map. It shows the natural features of the earth, such as mountains, deserts, and lakes. Yet another type of map is a distribution map. This sort of map contains information such as population distribution or the amount of rainfall in different regions of the world. If you looked at the Earth from space, you would see that much of the Earth's surface is covered with water. In fact, water makes up 70% of the Earth's surface. Most of the water on the Earth is salt water, found in the world's ocean system. Even though the world's oceans are really all connected, they are generally considered to be four distinct oceans: the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, and the Arctic. The Earth's surface at the bottom of the ocean, called the ocean floor, contains valleys and mountains just like the rest of the Earth's surface. Some of these mountains rise above the surface of the oceans to form islands. Until recently, the Earth's ocean floor was not even as well mapped as the surface of Mars because geographers were unable to see it. But recent satellite technology has allowed them to map the ocean floor in much greater detail, revealing plains, ridges, and even volcanoes. Compared to the amount of salt water on the Earth, there is very little fresh water. In fact, only 3% of the Earth's water is fresh. Fresh water is found in lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands. Fresh water can also be found underground. People can access this water, called groundwater, by digging wells. There is a finite amount of water on the Earth. That means no new water can be created. The water that exists today is the same water that existed thousands of years ago. Water just keeps going through a continuous cycle of movement called the water cycle. All water, from puddles to oceans, experiences a process called evaporation. The warmth from the sun changes the water into water vapor, and it rises into the air. Once in the air, the water vapor cools and condenses, or changes back into water droplets, forming clouds. Eventually, the water falls back to Earth as rain, snow, or another form of precipitation, only to begin the water cycle all over again. The Earth's fresh water is the source of drinking water for all the people of the world, and provides the water needed for all the animals and plants on the Earth to live and grow. Because water is essential for survival, and because new water cannot be created, people have historically settled near sources of water. For example, some of the great early civilizations grew up along the Nile River Valley in Egypt, as the Nile provided plenty of water to drink and made the surrounding land fertile for growing crops. People settled near water for other reasons too. Great port cities were established near natural harbors and rivers because of the ease of transporting goods by water. Water also provided the energy needed for mills to grind grain into flour, resulting in the establishment of mill towns along rivers. The amount of water in a region of the world has a tremendous impact on the lifestyle of the people living there. Water affects what they eat, what kind of jobs they hold, as well as how they travel. People living in Japan, for example, tend to eat a great deal of fish and seaweed because their country is surrounded by the ocean. Many Japanese make their living as fishermen, and when people travel in Japan, they often find it easiest to go by boat since their country is made up of thousands of islands. If water makes up 70% of the Earth's surface, then the remainder, or about 1/3 of the Earth's surface, is covered by land. The largest areas of land on the Earth are the 7 continents. These continents are North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. Some of these continents are connected to one another. Europe and Asia are sometimes referred to jointly as Eurasia. The Ural Mountains are usually considered the dividing line between the two. North and South America are connected by Central America, and Africa and Asia are connected by a narrow strip of land called the Isthmus of Suez. The surface of the Earth has many distinctive features. Some areas are flat, while others are steep. These different surface features are called landforms. There are 4 basic types of landforms. The ones you are probably most familiar with are hills and mountains. What distinguishes them is that hills simply are not as high as mountains. The other 2 basic types of landforms are plains and plateaus. Both terms describe areas that are flatter than hills or mountains. A plain is a large area of flat or nearly flat land. An area of flat land that rises higher than the land surrounding it is called a plateau, which means plate. In addition to these 4 basic types of landforms, there are many, many more. Some of the more familiar ones are islands, which are bodies of land completely surrounded by water, or peninsulas, which are pieces of land nearly surrounded by water. A type of landform you may be less familiar with is an isthmus, such as the Isthmus of Suez, mentioned earlier, which is a narrow strip of land connecting 2 larger areas of land. Or a mesa, which is a high, flat-topped hill shaped like a table. In fact, mesa is a Spanish word for table. The Earth's landscape is constantly changing due to forces on its surface, as well as forces under its surface. Many of these changes happen so gradually they're difficult to see except over a long period of time, such as the carving out of a valley by a river. Other changes are sudden and dramatic, such as an earthquake. Over millions of years, even the shapes of the continents have changed. Geographers believe that 200 million years ago, some of the continents may have been joined together. If you look at a map, you can see how some of the continents look as if they would fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. But very slowly, over millions of years, the continents moved apart until they ended up where they are today. Their movement has not stopped, however. Geographers predict that millions of years from now, the world could look very different than it does today. This movement of the continents is called continental drift. In order to understand continental drift, it is helpful to know what lies underneath the Earth's surface. Immediately under the land and water you see is a layer of rock called the Earth's crust. In some places, the crust is as thick as 20 miles. That may sound like a lot, but when you consider that the distance between the North and South poles is 8,000 miles, you realize that the crust is really quite a thin layer. Below the crust are layers of rock and metal that are so hot, some of it is melted or molten. The crust floats on top of these layers, and because it is floating, it can move. The Earth's crust does not move all in one piece, however, but in large segments called plates. Geographers think that Africa and South America are 2 plates that very slowly moved apart to form the 2 separate continents we know today. Many of the Earth's major geographic features are found along the edges of plates. As plates move and push against each other, their edges crumple up and eventually may form mountains or ocean ridges. The study of the forces within the Earth that cause these plate movements is called plate tectonics. In some cases, the movement of the Earth's crust produces sudden changes. As plates' edges push together or move apart, the ground above is sometimes unable to stretch anymore, and it may break and suddenly move. This is what happens in the case of earthquakes. Another effect of the movement of the Earth's crust are volcanoes. Sometimes the hot, molten rock and metal underneath the crust is pushed up through cracks in the ground. The molten rock that flows out of the ground is called lava. Lava can build up over time to form volcanic mountains. Changes to the Earth's surface may also be caused by conditions on the Earth, not just inside the Earth. These kinds of changes, too, can happen suddenly or over millions of years. Water can have a dramatic effect on the surface of the land. Oceans gradually wear away at the seashores. Heavy rains may cause rivers to flood. Flowing rivers over time can cut deep valleys through the land. In very cold areas, there are large moving sheets of ice called glaciers. As these glaciers move, they scrape away the ground beneath them, digging valleys. Thousands of years ago, glaciers covered much of Europe and North America. Many of these regions' mountains and valleys were formed by the movement of these glaciers. Wind, too, can cause changes to the surface of the land. As the wind blows, it carries away soil, eventually wearing down the land in a process called erosion. The wind also causes changes to the land through weathering. Small particles carried by the wind can act as an abrasive, gradually smoothing away the rough edges of rocks. Just as the availability of water can affect where people choose to live, landforms are also a major factor in determining population distribution. Extremely mountainous areas are generally thinly settled because it is difficult to build anything on the side of a mountain, and because the soil is usually too poor for farming. Most large population centers are located in flatter areas, since it is much easier to build cities and grow crops on level ground. Landforms also have an impact on what kind of work people do, as well as what kind of recreational activities they enjoy. Many people living in coastal or lowland plain regions, which are flatlands found near oceans or rivers, earn their living as farmers. These areas have the advantages of level land, making it easier to operate farm machinery and ample water supplies for crops. People who live in mountainous areas may spend their leisure time downhill skiing or mountain climbing. In flat areas, cross-country skiing and cycling would be more likely pastimes. Those people lucky enough to live on an island might enjoy sailing or windsurfing on the water that completely surrounds them. Water and land. These two things alone cover all the surface of the earth. Water may be salty, as in oceans, or fresh, as in rivers. The land may be steep like a mountain, or flat like a plain. But in all their various forms, land and water help determine not only where people live on the earth, but how they live as well. What do we call the two sets of lines that geographers have created to help locate places on a map or a globe? What are the two lines that divide the Earth into the northern and southern hemispheres and the eastern and western hemispheres? What percentage of the Earth's surface is covered by water? Can you name all 4 oceans? What percentage of the water found on Earth is fresh water? What are the 3 stages of the water cycle? Can you name all 7 continents? What are the 4 basic types of landforms found on the Earth? What name have geographers given to the movement of the continents over millions of years? Where would you be more likely to find a large population center? On top of a high mountain or on a coastal plain?